Hi everyone, welcome back to the course. We're in week 4 today. Hope you're doing well. I hope you have been following the previous courses. And if you haven't, feel free to watch them again. They are stored on the website somewhere so you can always review. And if you have not seen those at all, just stick around because I'm going to remind you of some of the things that we have covered in the past. And I think you can still get something out of this lesson. So watch this one, and then at the end of this one, go back and watch the previous 3 sessions. This course is about music theory. It's meant to give players of all levels, really, an understanding of what music theory is, trying to demystify what music theory is. It's a scary subject, but if taken into slow steps, it really makes sense, and it's all logic. It's just very logical course. And you don't need to be extremely good at math or anything like that to follow along. It's very easy if you follow the steps. So we're in the 4th step today, which is all about the major scale. And a little reminder of what we did previously. We spent some time on intervals, which is the distance between 2 notes. And the reason we did that is that without that measurement, without the measurement of the distance, we don't have music. We just have sounds, just static pitches. But a pitch becomes something when it's played in relation to something else. And that's why today I brought a looper. We're going to try this out, and let's just give it a try and illustrate what I mean. If I just have a note by itself, that's just a sound. Now if I play that note and loop it around, so that's going to loop over, and I'm going to put that sound in relation to something else. And you'll see that that note becomes something meaningful. It could mean something like this. Or something like this. Same note, different meaning. Okay, just to illustrate that a note can mean a lot of different things as long as it's put into context in relation to another note. And that was the illustration right there. And that's why it's important to know your intervals, the distance between 2 notes, because if you can measure those intervals and understand what makes the sound of a major third, a minor third, a perfect fourth, you're going to be more in control of your music, and you'll be able to play at will all of those different emotions that a note can have. So that's why it's important to know that. So that's what an interval is. An interval is always involving 2 notes. It's the distance between 2 notes. And the reference note that we're starting with, we call that the root. That's the starting point from which we're measuring all the other notes. And we saw that notes have different names, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then it goes back to 8. It's a big circle like that. And the distance between an A and another A, different pitches. This A is going to be higher, but same named note. That's called an octave, so that's an important interval to know. And between a root and its octave, we have 7 types of intervals. We have a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh. And all these intervals can be subcategorized into 2 main categories, major and minor. So we can relate to a major second or a minor second, a major third or a minor third. And the major is always wider than the minor. To make a major interval minor, you just move that major interval a half step or 1 fret below. And we also saw, so this is just a reminder of the previous 3 courses. If you just joined in and you feel I'm going kind of fast, you rewatch those 3 courses in 3 lessons and you'll be good. And we also learned that every interval can be major or minor except for the 2 exceptions, the 4th and the 5th. Those are perfect. Those are perfect intervals. Those are the intervals right in the middle between the root and the octave. If we look at the middle, we have the 4th and the 5th. Those are perfect. And we also learned that we could alter the 4th and the 5th, change them to make them something different than perfect. And we're not using the terms major or minor this time, but we can augment a perfect interval or diminish a perfect interval. So we can talk about a diminished fifth, for example, which is smaller than a perfect fifth, or an augmented fifth, which is wider than a perfect fifth. So that's what we did in the previous 3 lessons. And then last week, we took that knowledge of the intervals, of building intervals. We took that and built some chords with it. And we determined how to figure out what chord is being played by looking at its intervals. And we also learned last week that by looking at the intervals of a chord, that gives us clues as to which scale we can use. So that's the key to answer the question, which scale should I use over this chord progression? Look at the intervals of the chord and you'll have the answer. For example, if a chord has a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth, let's try that in A. We've got a root, a perfect third, and a perfect fifth, and that's our chord. Over that chord, we could play any scale that respects these elements. Any scale that has the same root, which is A in this case, any scale that has a major third, and any scale that has a perfect fifth. In other words, if I had to play a third over this chord in my scale, it would have to be major. A minor would clash with that. Any missing intervals, like the second, there's no second in this chord. You get to pick the type of second you want, major or minor. So let's try that. I'm going to record this on my loop. Very basic loop, not very pretty, but we'll just see what happens. I'll start by recording a bass to give us a tempo. Oops, didn't work, sorry. I'm going to erase that, sorry. Let's see. This is a new pedal we're learning here. Here's our bass. Over that, I'm going to record that 3-note chord with the root, the major third, and the fifth. So we're going to just record a simple rhythm progression. Very simple. So over that, we can pick a scale that has a root, a major third, and a fifth. So let's make a scale that has those elements. We've got the root. The second, we'll make it major. That'll work, right? Because the second is not indicated by the chord. I could also play a minor second if I wanted, but I'll just pick a major second, major third, because that's indicated by my chord. If I played a minor third, it clashes. It needs to be major. So we can keep all the intervals major and perfect. Why not? That works. That's a scale that would work because it respected the elements. Now let's try a scale that has a root, minor second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, and minor seventh. That should work too because I'm respecting the elements of the chord. Sorry, come on, stop. Very different flavor, right? 2 scales that worked on the same exact chord. Why? Because we respected the elements of the chord. So that's what harmony is. It's respecting the elements that are given by the chord. In this case, we did something very basic with a 3-note chord, but you can apply the same exact logic over a complex chord with more intervals. The more intervals you have in the chord, the less options you're going to have as which scale to use, because a rich chord with a lot of intervals are giving you more intervals than a more simple chord, and you've got to respect those intervals. So if you have 5 intervals that are given to you in a chord, Well, you only have two notes that can be altered at will. The two intervals that are not given by the chord, and there are 7 intervals total. Does that make sense? Feel free to interact too. This is an interactive course, so if you have questions, I will be happy to take them at the end of the session. At the end of each session, there is a design time for that, but feel free to interrupt this course too. I want it to make sense, and I want it to be beneficial for everyone. So, yeah, I'll be interrupted if we have any questions. Today we're going to talk about the major scale. And it's a very simple lesson if you followed the previous ones because you already know the major scale. But I wanted to use this hour to kind of introduce you to the concept of what a scale is. Very simple question, and most people think they have the answer. But I want to suggest a different approach to scales, maybe a healthier approach. And at least I found that in my playing, it really simplified a lot of different things. And it all comes back to the fact that music is a language, and if you try to analyze every concept, every theory concept, every phrasing concept, every musical concept, and try to find the relation to language and speech, it'll simplify everything and it'll make sense, and you'll find that you already have the answers if you know how to talk. Regardless of the language you're talking, you already have a lot of answers. For instance, what I just illustrated here, where we have to match elements together, like if a chord is given, then the scale should match that chord. If we relate that into language, it's like two people having a conversation. Someone is joining a conversation that is already established. That conversation is established by the topic of the conversation, the choice of vocabulary. Like you're not going to use the same words if you're talking to a 4-year-old or an adult. So all those things are part of what the conversation is. As a player, the conversation is what you're playing over. As a lead player, it's what you're playing over. So that could be in the form of a backing track or a band or a looper. In this case, I'm using a looper pedal. That's the conversation. And when you're matching the elements, well, when you come into a conversation, if someone is talking about cooking, for example, where you're going to use that cooking vocabulary. You're going to also try to adapt the tone that you're having with the tone of the conversation. Like if people are passionately talking about cooking, they're not necessarily arguing or screaming. So you're not going to get into the conversation with really loud voice and screaming and swear words. You're not. You're going to match the same type of vocabulary with the conversation. Same with this. When you're playing over a backing track, you've got to match the style, you've got to match the intervals that are given by the chords and all that. So matching elements. And the reason I'm saying that is that I want you to get in the habit of trying to find a way to relate to music as a conversation. It's going to help you tremendously with a lot of things. So how do we do that with scales? Well, first of all, if we don't do that, scales can become very mathematical, like learning what makes a major scale, what makes a Lydian mode, what makes pentatonic. It can be very mathematical, and in the end, it can create some sterile playing. So I don't want that. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Analyzing scales definitely has their use because we can extract from knowing the intervals of the scale. We can extract chords. We can extract a lot of different things. So it's good to know those things, which is what we're doing in this course. But there is also a healthy approach to scales and modes. Instead of learning all of them, just think of scales as an alphabet. Because if you think about it, in real language, an alphabet, you've got all your letters, and you extract from that alphabet letters. You put them one after the other to create words. You put one word after the other to create a sentence, and all that creates a story or a speech. Same with music. A scale is just a musical alphabet. A scale on its own doesn't mean much. And if you are playing a solo, for example, you're asked to play a solo over a chord and you determine that, well, I can use the Lydian mode over that, which you're not supposed to know now necessarily. That's okay if you don't, but that's a scale. And if you just play it like this, that comes to basically talking this way: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and just telling the alphabet. And that's not musical. You don't want to just tell the tool the alphabet. You want to create words. Same with scales. And the reason I'm saying that is that there is a risk for players who learn scales as a formula all the time to tend to categorize the notes of the scale and think that, well, because my scale is called, let's say, A major, and A is the root, well, the root is the most important one. And therefore, I'm going to start all my licks and end all my licks on the root. Or the third is super important, so I'm going to land all my notes on the third. And there is an idea behind it that can be a good idea, but it's kind of unhealthy because it kind of limits you in the way that you're phrasing, and it prevents you to really express yourself musically. Just see a scale as a musical alphabet, and there are a lot of different alphabets out there. They're all unique and individual alphabets, and that'll avoid problems down the road. For those of you who are a little more advanced and know your modes, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. If you don't know your modes, just don't pay attention. But for those of you who do, you might be tempted to think that the Dorian mode starts on the second degree of an Ionian mode. Or you might be thinking that, well, Phrygian is exactly like a major scale starting on the third note. And I bet that 80% of the players are into that mode of thinking. And that can create problems. Because people do that because they want to find a shortcut. Instead of memorizing all the 7 modes, they just memorize the major scale and start that major from a different degree. But by doing that, what you're doing is basically saying that there is only one alphabet, and I just have to start that alphabet from a different note. And if I do that, these different notes are more important than others. And anyways, that's too mathematical. And what I want you to get in the habit of doing is seeing modes or scales as unique and individual scales, alphabets, different languages, different alphabets picked from different countries. I love to tell my students that keys, like musical keys, are like countries you're visiting. Like if you're going to play over a backing track in E major, you're visiting the E major country. And so you're going to have to speak the language of the E major country. So you've got to learn the alphabet, the E major alphabet. And then from there, you make up your own words. And what's cool with music is that as long as you make up words in the alphabet that matches the key, people are going to understand you. If you're visiting the B-flat Phrygian country, so you've got to play something in B-flat Phrygian, well, you just look at your B-flat Phrygian alphabet, which is a 7-note alphabet, 7-letter alphabet, 7-note musical alphabet, and just make up your words. Just pick any of the 7 notes, and you're going to be understood by that B-flat Phrygian alphabet. So if you're joining a jam and they're playing in B-flat Phrygian, what you're playing, as long as you use that alphabet, is going to be understood by the other musicians, and they're going to be able to interact. If you pick an alphabet that doesn't match the key, that's where it sounds outside of the key. It sounds out, and although sometimes sounding outside can be perceived as interesting and not necessarily bad, if you're doing it not on purpose, then that's bad. And the relation, I told you that we've got to relate everything musical to the language. It's kind of like me saying, like talking to you in English, and every once in a while, like there's a word that I'm not sure I know in English, so I use the French word. Let's see. If I talk to you about my guitar, so this guitar is very interesting because I use a French word, very close to the English word, but if every once in a while you use a word from a different language, it sounds interesting or clever or I don't know. It adds a little bit of flavor to your speech. But if randomly I just switch completely, et maintenant je vous parle français, et si vous comprenez pas, c'est pas grave, je vais continuer de parler comme ça. That doesn't make any sense. But if I use just one word in French, or whatever, that's perceived as okay. I don't know why I'm telling you that anymore. I lost my train of thought. Basically, yeah, just to tell you that matching the elements is really important. If you borrow a lick from a different key and throw that in, that's okay. But if you play in a completely different key all the time, that's going to be outside. So today is all about the major scale. You already know the major scale because the shape that we've used, and we're going to get practical now, we're going to be able to play. The shape that we use to figure out all the major intervals and the perfect intervals is the major scale. So let's take a look at that on the screen. Here's the diagram. There are 3 different shapes because of the tuning of the guitar. Anytime we have strings 2 and 3 involved at the same time, the shape changes a little bit. But if we look at that top diagram here, the red note is the root, the starting point from which we're measuring all the other intervals. And we use that shape to determine all the major intervals and the perfect intervals. The perfect being the 4th and the 5th. If I play that shape from the low E string 5th fret, we've got a series of 7 intervals. From the root, the distance between this first note and the second is a major second. The distance between the first note and the third is a major third. The first and the 4th, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th, octave. The octave being the same note but on a different pitch. So that shape is called the major scale. So a major scale is made of major intervals and perfect intervals. And we have 3 shapes here because if it involves strings 2 and 3, it's going to change. So the second diagram, for example, see how that shape spans across 3 consecutive strings? Well, if we have our root on the 4th string, that's going to involve strings 4, 3, 2. 3 and 2 are together. That means that the shape changes slightly. Here's the shape. And the third shape on the bottom here is also a different shape because it involves strings 2 and 3 together. Here's that shape. The root is always red, and that means that that diagram, those shapes are movable. You don't have to start it on the 5th fret. You can start it anywhere. The root can move around. And so you know how to play the major scale anywhere on your fretboard. Now, because the shape uses 3 consecutive strings, that means that we're kind of limited in the range of the guitar right now if we just use one shape. It's completely feasible, but we're limiting in the range. So if I record something in A major, for example, A is going to be my root, and I can play an A on the low E string 5th fret. I'm going to play an A major chord, and over that I'm going to play that first shape. I'm actually going to play more than one chord. I'll play several chords in A major. I'll explain to you how I did that in a second. But here's our backing track. So we've got our backing track. It's in A major, so I can play that first shape from the low E string 5th fret, and all those notes are going to work. They're attracted to what you're hearing in the background. I'll increase the volume a little bit. If I play my shape, I just played the alphabet there. Now I'm going to make a word by maybe picking the first note, the 3rd, the 4th, and back to the 1st. That's a word. That's a musical word. And I can make several different words. I can say a word fast or slow. A lot of different ways to say a word, but from the same alphabet. Now I'm limited in range, right, between these notes. What if I wanted to Sorry, I tried to read the manual really quick earlier, but I didn't master it yet for the pedal. What if I tried to extend that range so that instead of covering just this this range, I extended it? Well, I could take that last root that I have, which is on the 4th string, 7th fret. Now my root is on the 4th string, and you see the second diagram there? That's a root on the 4th string. So I could play that shape from that 4th string, 7th fret. And now I have an A major scale in 2 areas of the fretboard, 2 octaves. So I'm using shapes 1 and 2 in the same key. And over that backing track, it's going to extend that range. Right? So now my words can cover a wider area of the fretboard. I'm still using 7 notes. Some are higher octaved than the others, but still 7 notes. Now what if I wanted to use that 3rd shape? The root is on the 3rd string, so I need to find an A on that 3rd string. I have one on the 3rd string, 2nd fret. So I could play that shape. So now I covered 3 areas of the fretboard. The first one, the first shape. Shape 2. And shape 3. So we just played with the 7-note alphabet of an A major scale and covered different areas of the fretboard. Now, if you've been following, you might think that that's kind of complicated to memorize, right? But I just wanted to show you that you can play the same scale in multiple zones of the fretboard. It's still going to sound the same in a way because you're just repeating those 7 notes over and over. Thankfully, someone really clever decided to, instead of like jumping around like this, to kind of take a blank fretboard and put a dot anytime we had a root, anytime we had a major 2nd, anytime we had a major 3rd, anytime we had one of the 7 intervals of the major scale, put a dot on your fretboard and you will see a big fretboard filled with 7 notes over and over and over. And that is helpful because once you have that, you can split the fretboard into different areas of the fretboard, depending on how you want to play. Some positions are vertical, like that. So from your perspective, they're kind of like little towers like that. And some are horizontal, like that. They cover a wide area of the fretboard. So, and they both have their use. Ideally, I want you to know all of them, but just pick a few, memorize them, and get comfortable with them. Usually, the vertical positions are narrower, and if you've been playing for a little while, the minor pentatonic scale that you use most likely is one of the vertical ones, which falls in kind of a narrower area of the fretboard. That's kind of vertical, and it doesn't necessarily facilitate fast playing. And you have also major scales that are vertical, for example. And those vertical positions are usually going to be helpful for more melodic things. They're easier in a way because you can visualize the intervals, so you can focus on trying to create musical words, licks, that bring out the color of the major 3rd that you like so much, for example. And those vertical positions are helpful for that because it's easier to find your major 3rd. It's right there. you have horizontal ones. Horizontal ones are not very comfortable because, in the sense of finding your intervals, because they kind of span across a wide area of the fretboard, and the shape that we've learned in the previous sessions kind of covers a narrow area of the fretboard. So it's kind of harder to know what that is in relation to that root. But the advantage of the horizontal positions is that usually they have 3 notes per string. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And anytime you have a consistency of number of notes per string, that facilitates sequences, which are musical ideas that repeat themselves, and that facilitates the fingering, meaning that it's going to help you play a little bit faster. Because you could repeat notes. That would be very hard to play in a vertical position. But these two types of playing, vertical, are the same exact scales. Sound exactly the same. So if you close your eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell if this is a vertical or horizontal. Give it a try. Close your eyes. Am I playing vertical here or not? I'm actually playing horizontal. This is vertical. You can't really tell the difference. Okay, so you know your major scale, and I'm going to teach you a few fingerings here, a few positions. So we're going to take a look at the next diagram, which is about to come on your screen, and there you go. Those are the two positions that I used. The top one is the vertical one. It's also called the box position sometimes because it kind of looks like a little box or a little tower. The minor pentatonic scales or the major pentatonic scales usually are boxed positions like that. And 3 note per string, which is the lower one, and that covers a wider area of the fretboard. So let's give that a try. Let's learn that top one, the box position. You already know it, or at least you know the first octave because that's the shape we've been learning. And remember, try to stick to 1 finger per fret as you're playing this. So we're going to start with the middle finger. And if we ascend from the low E string 5th fret, which is the root, to the octave, we'll have frets 5, 7. And on the next string, 4, 5, 7. And on the next one, 4, 6, 7. And that gives you all the intervals, as you know. So root, major seconds, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and root. Let's learn the other half. We landed on the 4th string, 7th fret with a pinky. And we just finished playing frets 4, 6, 7. On the next string, it's exactly the same thing. 4, 6, 7. Okay? On the next string, we only have 2 notes. We have frets 5 and 7. And on the next one, we have 4, 5, 7. And what you can do to memorize that, if you're completely new to that, well, you play your first shape. You know it already. You repeat those last 3 notes, and then you start your shape again. Make sense? Play your shape. Repeat those last 3 notes on the next string, and start your shape again. When I say start your shape, I say start your shape because on that 2nd string you have frets 5, 7. That's the starter of your shape, which started on the low E string, frets 5, 7. On the next string we have frets 4, 5, 7, which is just like the 5th string, 4, 5, 7. Notice that if I play all that scale, the box position, the very last note that I have is the major second. Why? Because the major third would require me to move my hand, to extend my hand into another area of the fretboard, and that's no longer a boxed position. I'm absolutely allowed to do that, but that's not the position. And remember that positions are only meant to help you memorize the fretboard. That's all. They're not meant to be this magical position where all your licks are going to sound good. People are going to usually gravitate around a position not because it's more comfortable. They might think that it's more comfortable, but the reason it's more comfortable is simply that they have spent most of their time in that particular position. But each position is as comfortable as the others. And remember, positions are slices of the fretboard. So if we go back to what I said a few minutes ago, if someone were to put a dot anytime you have a root, a major second, a major third, a fourth, fifth, major sixth, major seventh, you'd have a fretboard full of dots. And if you take slices of the fretboard, those are positions. And we just learned the first position right there. But what I would recommend that you do, if you have time, if you want to take the time, it's very beneficial. Find some blank diagrams online somewhere, print them out, and write all the scale all across the fretboard. So anytime you have a root, put a dot, major second, major third, and so forth, and make your position, make your slices, and see how they fit together. See how these areas of the fretboard just kind of fit together to make a whole and to help you kind of memorize that. That was for the first position, the boxed one. We're going to look at the other one, the second one, which is a horizontal position. And if you look at the notes, you see that we have the same exact intervals because it's the same exact scale. It's still the major scale. That one is maybe a little easier to memorize. It goes into 3 notes per string, and a lot of players have based their whole guitar career on the 3 note per string patterns. A lot of shredders or harder forms of music, and because it facilitates the speed playing, use those kind of scales. So that's the A major scale, 3 note per string position. We're going to start exactly where we started the boxed position, same exact root because we're in the same key, we're playing the same exact scale. We're just organizing these notes differently. So low E string 5th fret, that doesn't change. The major second is on the 7th fret, that doesn't change. Now the major third, instead of playing it on the next string, we're going to play it on the same string. And that's where you can see that frets 5, 7, 9 are starting to draw a horizontal position. We're starting to spread across, not the boxed one, we're spreading apart. So 5, 7, 9 on the low E string. On the next string, 5, 7, 9 again. And that requires a stretch, by the way. And as far as which fingers to use, some people will use index, middle, pinky. So they do the extension between the index and the middle. I like to do the extension between the ring and the pinky. But there's no right or wrong. Just be aware of that. So 5, 7, 9 twice. On the next one, we have 6, 7, 9 twice. So when I say twice, it's across 2 strings. And on the next 2 strings, we have 7, 9, 10. So you see that it goes in pairs like that, in pairs of strings. 5, 7, 9 twice. 6, 7, 9. 7, 9, 10. And then you can descend that. And that's your alphabet. We extended that alphabet to have just more range, but it's just 7 notes. 7 notes are enough for you to speak the Ionian language. The Ionian language requires for you to just make up words with the Ionian alphabet, which is a 7-note alphabet. It's a diatonic scale. Dia means 7, and that's where we get that from. So let's try that, and let's try that over. We'll just create a very simple loop using a bass type of thing. We'll start with the bass, and for the bass, we'll just play just roots. On top of that bass, we're going to add some chords. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm going to play some chords that are extracted from the major scale. And I'll just play a few. So I've got my backing track my A Ionian country, on which I'm going to make words using those 7 notes. We'll start with the box position. I'll just say the alphabet right now, and you'll see how all the notes match. So I'm in the right language there. Now I'm going to make some words. There's no right or wrong way to make words. Just pick a few of these notes and make a lick or a word. For example. And now think, how can I say that word? Well, I can say it with a hint of I don't know how to pronounce that word. melancholic, you know, like kind of a little bit sad, a little thoughtful. Could sound like that, right? Or it could sound excited. Or it could sound loud. Or quiet and timid. You can say a word in a lot of different ways. I'm going to just try to have a conversation with this backing track using the box position. It's different than just saying the alphabet. Right? Just making words. Now I'm going to try that with the horizontal position. Same exact notes, but this time it's going to span across multiple zones of the fretboard. You can see how it facilitates the speed type of playing. And ideally what we want to do is blend both positions together. The boxed, which is more focused, it allows you to see the intervals, and the extended range one. See that in the boxed one, I'm more focused. And when I move to the horizontal one, it's easier to blaze through your ideas because of the way that scale is built. So that's for the major scale. You can move that major scale anywhere you want. Of course, we're in A. The root was A, but of course it's movable. So if we had something in F sharp, for example, well, F sharp would be the root. And you would play one of your positions from that F sharp note. But it's got the same color. It's the same organization of intervals for that particular scale. The major scale is always going to be root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, and major seventh. So that's for the major scale. I want to touch a little bit on how I was making those backing tracks, how I knew which chords to use. It's not necessarily a mathematical language or mathematical knowledge type of thing. It's more of knowing the intervals. There are two parts for the backing tracks that I created, or the loops that I created. The first one was the bass, the root, because that's the fundamental note that is going to attract anything else you play. So you need to have a root that is very present. I'm going to make sure that I'm in tune. I think I got a little out of tune here at some point. So we're going to consider an A, for example, for the root, and we're going to use those positions. If we can go back to the positions on the screen. Great. We're going to give that a try. I'm going to, just bear with me. I'll do some talking as I'm playing. I'm going to start with a bass. Very, very basic, just a root. In this case, we're in A major. I'll just play my A. Which means that anything I play is going to be attracted to that A. Whether it's single notes or chords. That's a very interesting color. No matter the chord, it's always attracted. It's getting its meaning from the root and the bass. Okay, so we've got our root, which is that A note on the low E string 5th fret. That's the red note on that you see. I'm going to use that major box position. I'm going to create a first chord. There are multiple ways of creating chords, but I'm going to do it the standard way by picking a note of the chord, skipping the next and play the next, skipping a next and play the next. And I'm going to build 3-note chords. The first note is going to be the root. And we already have a root here that's being looped, but I'm still going to play it, and I'll play it an octave higher. So I'll play that root, which is on the 4th string, 7th fret. So right now, really, we're not getting much. We're just getting a root, not much significance to it, just a root that's repeated over and over. So I'm going to record that root anyways. I'm going to skip the next note, which is the second, to the 3rd. So that's the note I want. Now I'm going to skip the next note, which is the 4th, to the 5th. Now I have a 3-note chord that is extracted from the A major box. If I wanted to build a 4-note chord, I could, by skipping the next note, which is the 6th, to the 7th. Let's try that. I'm going to add a major 7th on top of that. Over that chord, I could play a major scale. Okay, so you followed the logic here, right? That was by building a 4-note chord from the root. We're now going to consider a second chord. And we'll build the second chord this time from the 2nd note. So I'm going to record my loop again. And this time we're going to go back to the diagram. And I'm going to build a chord this time from the 2nd. So we've got a major 2nd, which is here. So I'm going to play that, record that. It's not quite in tempo, but that'll work. Skip the next note, which is the 3rd to the 4th. Skip the 5th to the 6th. Skip the 7th to the root. Interesting chord, and the major scale will also work over that. Now, if you just took that last chord and created a full song with just that last chord, it might sound a little dense, and it did sound a little dense. But if you take that second chord and put it into context, so instead of just playing that second chord, which was something like that, but instead of just playing that, you put it after the first chord we built. Now it sounds more relaxed because it's in context. And you can keep building your chords like that. We did it from the root, then we tried it from the second, we could do it from the third, the fourth, and that'll give you 7 options to create backing tracks. And eventually it might sound something like this. And that's your backing track. Now that is a very standard traditional way of building chords, by taking the one note, skipping the next to the next, skipping the next to the next. But you can be as creative as you want. You don't have to do it that way. You could pick any notes of the major scale and it's going to work. And it's going to give you some interesting chords. If I record a bass again, and I considered my fretboard full of the notes that make a major scale, I might end up with something like this as far as a chord, because these notes are found in my big scale. Anyway, it's kind of messed up at the end, but just to give you an idea that you don't have to follow the pick a note, skip the next one to the next, skip the next, and so forth. You can be as creative as you want, as long as the notes you're using in your chords are part of the alphabet, the musical alphabet that you're working with. So that's checking the time. Yeah, we're at the end of our session. We're going to open it up to questions. But that's for the major scale, and next week we're going to talk about the minor scale, and then really from there we'll talk about modes and other types of alphabets. But this week I want you to just memorize these shapes. They'll be somewhere on the website. Rewatch the previous sessions if it's helpful, and let's open it up to questions if we have any.
Yeah, we've got a few. So this one's going back to last week's chord building, I believe. Yep. So any interval not in the chord could be major or minor.
Yep, exactly. As long as the interval is not given to you in the chord that you're playing, you get to choose which type of interval you want to use.
Okay, here's one from 1964 Mustang. The boxed position is playing vertical, and the 3-string position is playing horizontally.
Yep, exactly. And that's from your perspective when you're looking at your guitar. Vertical would be, like this, or kind of like that. Horizontal, like that. If you look at your guitar, that's the horizon over there. So horizontal spans across a wide area of fretboards, and vertical is more a narrow area of the fretboard. Yes.
Okay. When I try to play the first scale fast, I have problems with the upstrokes and downstrokes. I end up on upstrokes, downstrokes without consistency. How can I overcome that problem?
So that's you touched exactly on the reason why some players don't use that scale very much. And the first position you're talking about, the boxed version, and the reason why you're having problems is because of that inconsistency of number of notes per string. The 3-note per string is consistent. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. For example, would always work. There's always 3 notes per string. So how can you overcome it? Well, it depends. You've got to kind of choose what you want to focus on. First of all, it doesn't matter if it's consistent or not as long as it sounds okay, right? That's fine. I wouldn't worry about which direction you're attacking the notes as long as your musical ideas make sense. And usually when you're playing with that boxed position, you're not going to have a consistency. Unless you decide to do alternate picking strictly, down, up, down, up, down, up, then just focus on that. And what I would do is pick a short lick or a short section of that scale. And I would probably pick the first two strings, because on the low E string you have two notes, and on the next one you have three. And just loop that. So loop those 5 notes and just do alternate picking. Down, up, down, up, down. And if you loop that, the next time around it'll be reversed. Very slow tempo, down. So down, up, 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 like that. And just take a small area of the fretboard and loop it. But again, the inconsistency of picking is not that important in the boxed position, because that position is more geared towards more focused playing, more melodic playing. And where you want to really have some kind of system going on is for the faster runs. And usually you're going to find that system by organizing the notes in a logical way. And usually that's with the horizontal playing. So just loop a small section and go with that.
Okay. There are some lessons on the site about the caged system. Does this relate to that system?
Yeah, great question. So everything in music is related to everything. Everything relates to everything else. The caged system is, we can call it the caged positions, same thing. And what that means is that caged, C-A-G-E-D. And the idea is that in these 5 chord shapes, we can play anything. And when you talk about the C-A-G-E-D chords, we're talking about the open position chords. So C open, A, G, E, and D. The idea is that if you take these chords, they all have special characteristics. For instance, the C chord, C open, has its root on the 5th string. And from your perspective, when you look at your guitar, it happens on the left side. So you take that characteristic that you find in the C open position, and you can build a scale or another chord that has the same characteristic somewhere else on the fretboard. That's what the caged system is. It's a full different topic. The short answer is yes, it all relates to each other. In this case, the position that we learned for the boxed version of A major is the E position. Not E because of the root, but because of the shape. Like if you take an E chord, E open chord, the characteristic of that chord is that the root is on the low E string and it happens on the right side of that root. Well, that position shares those characteristics. The root is on the low E string and the scale happens on the right side of that. So it's an E shape. So yes, it relates to the cage system, definitely.
Okay. Being new and from what you are teaching, is there some material that you suggest we read?
No, but I would definitely suggest that you rewatch the first 3 videos. When you say new, I don't know if you're new to guitar in general or if you just joined in. But if you did just join in, rewatch the previous 3 sessions. It's about 3 hours. You can watch one a day or something, and you'll be caught up. It'll definitely make more sense. It should.
Okay. I don't understand the difference between the 2 patterns.
Good question. So the difference is just the layout of the notes. In essence, they sound exactly the same. So if I play the first position, or the first few notes of the first position, and the second, they sound exactly the same. I'm playing the same exact notes. And if I were on a piano, we wouldn't have this this nonsense of different positions, like position 1, 3 note per string. Same thing. But the thing on the guitar, you can play the same exact note on different strings, different frets. It's a way of organizing your notes. And some are going to be more useful for particular licks. You might find that you're stuck trying to do something like this. Like really fast. And so instead of playing it that way, you reorganize your notes so that it's easier to play. And the 3-note per string has this consistency of 3 notes per string, and it might be easier to visualize. It's way easier to play fast that way than this. That's really difficult. See, I'm messing up there. It's just a way of organizing your notes, but in essence, same pitches are played.
Can you talk about the formula for the major scale? That might help some folks of just a different perspective.
Yeah, so the formula is the same exact formula that we had in the original shape used in session 1, the very first lesson. And the formula is the blueprint of the scale. That formula is going to give you all the intervals found in that scale, and that's what's going to allow you to extract from it different chords, to create chord progressions, and also to match certain scales with chords, which is what we've been doing in the past, last week. And the formula is basically root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, and major seventh. All the intervals are major or perfect. And you know that only the fourth and the fifth are perfect. So major intervals and perfect intervals for the major scale.
Okay. Plum Hunter, is shape different than position or different ways of looking at the same thing?
It's it's the same thing. Different ways of looking at the same thing. It's really the same exact thing. Position, a shape. Same.
Okay. Which intervals can be used for playing these pairs in major scale?
Not quite sure what you mean by pairs. If you can specify
Okay.
or clarify.
I'll watch for his if he
Okay.
adds anything else to that. He had another one. How can we connect these interval things with notes in music and sheet music?
That's a good question. I'm not a reader. Might not be the best person to ask this, but I do know that if you know how to play a major third from any note without even knowing where the note is by going by shapes, which is the shapes that we've been learning, if you spend time, if you want to be a good reader, just spend time recognizing on the spot what a major third is. Well, a major third, basically, if you have your musical lines, your music sheets, a major third, or a third, not necessarily major, but a third would be basically if you have a note on a line, the third will be on the next line. If you have a note on a space, then the third will be on the next space or the space just before. And if you can visualize all those intervals, like a fifth is, it's on the same type of thing. So if you've got a line, it's going to be on a line, but you skip one, that's a fifth. That's going to help your reading by knowing your intervals and associating these intervals that you can play on the spot on your instrument with the shapes of your sheet music. That's basically all I can say about it, just because I'm not a reader. I haven't had to use it very much.
Okay. Still haven't seen any update on what Chubb was asking with that last one.
Okay.
So this is the last question we have for the moment.
Okay.
From Nickel Fret. Are you going to cover all the chords that cover the modes, each mode that is?
No, but I will give you the tools to do it on your own. And that's really the most important thing. Because yes, you're right. I could spend time on each mode explaining to you, but it's going to imprint a lot better if you do the work. And it's the same exact method as we use today and as we will use next week. Next week we'll talk a little bit about modes, we're going to talk about the minor scale, and we'll do that method again, so it'll be strengthened in your mind for that. So yeah.
Okay, we got one more here. Just came in from Jimmy Talkin. Let me pull it up. To build a diminished or augmented chord, what do I do with the fourth or fifth?
Okay, augmented chord. Let's start with that one. An augmented chord is a chord with a root, a major third, and an augmented fifth. So you just has to do with the fifth. The diminished chord, I don't know why I started with augmented. Diminished is the same thing, but you don't do anything with the fourth. Diminished and augmented have to do with the root, third, fifth. So you either augment the fifth or diminish the fifth. Sorry, bad way of phrasing things, but hopefully it made sense. Great, everyone. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I hope this was beneficial. If you have questions throughout the week, write them down. Next week, I'll take some time to answer those too. And if you are new to this, again, rewatch the previous 3. Next week, we'll talk about the minor scale. And I hope you will be there, same day and same time. Thanks so much. See you next week.